Before we get started, I have a quick favor. I've been self-funding the Finding Genius podcast for 5 years now. I've done over 3,000 episodes. And as you can see on YouTube, we're up over 1 million views on the channel, which is fantastic. The next thing I really want to push on is to get up to 10,000 subscribers. Because once we do, we'll be able to put a donate button and we'll be able to solicit donations to help keep the podcast running and to also get the Finding Genius Foundation moving along. We have a big project studying anxiety, depression, and PTSD and working on a product to help people overcome these problems because I've seen them explode recently after the last 2 years of the whole virus situation. So if you would, please subscribe to the podcast. That would help us tremendously. Give us a thumbs up and check in the description for Buy Me a Coffee. It's about $5. If you could buy me a coffee, I'd really appreciate it. It would help keep the channel going, and I love coffee. Thank you.
Forget frequently asked questions,
common sense, common knowledge, or Google.
How about advice from a real genius? 95% of people in any profession are good enough to be qualified and licensed. 5%
go above and beyond.
They become very good at what they do, but only
0.1%
are real geniuses. Richard Jacobs has made it his life's mission to find them for you. He hunts down and interviews geniuses in every field: sleep science, cancer, stem cells, ketogenic diets, and more. Here come the geniuses. This is the Finding Genius Podcast
with Richard Jacobs.
Hello, this is Richard Jacobs with the Finding Genius Podcast. My guest today is Eric Miller, owner and chief financial advisor of Econologics Financial Advisors. He's the author of The Financial Beast. So he's been doing financial planning for over 20 years, and he works with private practice owners and associates. So we'll dive into what Eric does and how he advises people. So welcome, Eric.
Thank you so much, Richard. Appreciate it.
Tell me a bit about your background, and then we'll get into your current work.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. We decided that back in 2008, we wanted to start a financial planning company, which, if you remember back then, was probably the worst year that you could even think of to start a financial company. And a couple of things that we focused on. Number one, I'm coming from a healthcare background. I saw what bad financial advice did to people in the healthcare industry. The lack of training, lack of financial education, people that were very good with patients, but not so good with their money. So that was the group of people that we wanted to help. And, as we started getting into, the healthcare business, I learned really early on that if I was going to be any good at what I did, I really had to understand the business side of the healthcare industry. If I was going to help people get out of debt, if I was going to help people with their personal investments and create multiple income streams, I really had to understand their biggest asset, which is their practice for many of them. And, ever since then, that's been our focus is, I don't work with teachers or engineers or anyone else. We only work with people in the healthcare industry.
Well, when you say their practices, what do you mean? What kind of practices?
Well, we started off working with in the physical therapy field. And when I say working we started off with the physical therapy field, and that morphed into dentistry and occupational therapy and optometry and all different kinds of practitioners that we work with. And that's what I mean when I say the different types of practices that we work with.
Okay, so in the medical field, what are some of the unique difficulties that these people have? Do they have tons of equipment and they have high loan payments? Do they have like receivables problems because of insurance? Like, what are the things that bedevil them?
Yeah, you name it. It can be any one of those. And I think for the practices that have insurance reimbursements, collecting money, it's a problem. Other industries, cost of goods sold is a problem. I think the underlying problem is that most of these people that got into this business were caregivers. They loved the healthcare aspect of it. They didn't understand the business side of it. And when I say the business side specifically is the financial management. What do I do with a dollar when it comes into my organization? And do I understand how to manage the finances of the practice so that I can expand it, so that I can increase its value, but most importantly, so that I can pay myself so that I'm not, despondent and insolvent in my health.
Okay. I mean, so what does he the attitude of the practitioners? Are they coming to you for help? Are you going to them and saying, I can see from the outside you need help? Like how does the relationship with you start typically?
Yeah, it typically starts there. I think a lot of people want help financially. They run a business, they help patients, and they look at what's left over every single month, and there's got to be a better way. I see that, on paper, it says that my profit and loss statement says I made a lot of money, but then I look at my bank accounts and I don't know where it is. And then, of course, they start looking at their personal investments. They start looking at retirement. They start looking at their debt, their overwhelming amount of debt that they have. And they're like, I need some help. So that's typically what we'll see initially. We'll see people that are making a lot of money. Their practices are doing well, but they're just not seeing the fruits of their labor, or they're not able to keep it. So or I think we can step in and really help those people.
I mean, how bad is this? These businesses usually operate with like any free cash flow. Are they one payroll away from death, or like how are they?
Oh, I would say that 90% of practices, at least that we've seen out there, you know what? It really isn't just medical. It's all businesses that we've seen this. But I would say 90% of practices maybe have 1 month of business savings in it that could be able to withstand some kind of a economic downturn. It was worse pre-2020. It was worse. Like people,
how much worse?
Oh, I would say it was routine for us to see people that would maybe had half a month of payroll in their checking account, and barely being able to make payroll, and that's more of the norm than the really high quality practices. I mean, obviously there's people that are really, really good with money, but by and large, that's not what we saw. The profit margins are dwindling, cost of employees and associates and providers is going up. Finding good help is definitely challenging. All these things are squeezing profit in the healthcare space.
I would think that, with price action going up everywhere, with inflation everywhere, these guys would have raised their prices quite a bit. So are their margins still eroding even by raising their prices? Or is it insurance reimbursement has gone down and that's what gets them?
Well, certainly, for people that are getting insurance reimbursements, they're staying the same while inflation is going up. Okay, so that's just eating into their profit. But we'll still see a lot of practitioners that it may raise prices, but wage inflation is going up. And it just, at the end of the day, it ends up costing them, more money in their pockets, and they see it in their dwindling profit margins. So, but like I said, the financial management to me is one of the skills that so many people need to understand if you're going to run a business, but yet there's just so few places to go to actually teach that. And most people, CPAs or bookkeepers, are not teaching them how to do that.
Are you teaching them, or are you just helping them with it? Do they want to learn, or they say, look, just fix this, and I don't care?
I'm trained as a financial advisor, so that means that I'm trained to help you with your household. I'm trained to make sure that you are building multiple income sources and you have a good retirement and you're managing your debt and you're protecting your assets. I never thought I would have to get into how to manage your business finances, but it's paramount for you to have personal financial success if you have this practice that is bringing all this money in, and most of the practices that we work with are doing anywhere between, $1 million to $10 million in annual revenue, with a lot of them in between there. And I can tell you that it doesn't really matter how big you are. The laws of money apply. And if you don't understand what those laws are when it comes to managing your cash flow, then, you're going to end up in the same place, which is insolvent or barely having enough just to get by.
So what are some of the things that you teach them, early on that maybe should be obvious, but isn't, some of the cornerstone info?
Really simple. I think that you got to understand there's two basic principles when it comes to income and expenses of a practice. And the first rule I teach every single person is that your practice will try to spend every dollar that it makes and then some. People look at me like, what do you mean by that? I'm like, it is a natural law of any organization that it will try to spend every dollar that it makes and then some, if you allow it. So it's not just you. It doesn't matter how big the practice is, how much revenue they're doing. There's always going to be a pull or demand to spend money on whatever, whether it's payroll, taxes, new equipment, whatever it is. The second rule I teach people is that your practice will make the exact amount of money it thinks it needs to make to survive. And kind of the genius of what I think we've been able to communicate to people is those two basic principles right there. Because, money doesn't come from a tree, doesn't come from the Federal Reserve. It comes from necessity. It comes from demand. Like if I said to you, hey, Richard, I need you to come up with $100,000 tomorrow to save your child's life. Like, would you come up with the money? Of course you would. Why?
I would do my absolute best.
Yeah, needed. It's a necessity. So the problem that most owners have is that they view their payroll as a necessity. They view their rent as a necessity. They view their overhead as a necessity. But you know what they don't view as a necessity? Their profit. And once you start to incorporate your profit and treat it like an expense, just on par with any of those other things, it changes the whole dynamic of how you look at money.
How do you treat profit as an expense?
Really simple. How do you pay your rent every month? It just comes out of your account, right? How do you
Well, right. Your net profit has to pay it.
Yeah, you have to remove, you have to set up profit account so that when a dollar comes in, then that money directly goes into those accounts that we designate as profit accounts. Okay. And then that way the necessity level is put on the organization that says, hey, look, that isn't it's treated like an expense. Now it's something that you can get and you can recover, right? You can get the money out, but it's treated like an expense, just like any other bill that you have. And that's probably the thing that I've learned early on is that if you want to have a profit long term, you have to treat it like an expense. You have to treat it as like a bill. And once you do that and you get comfortable with doing that, all the problems that most owners have, which is where am I going to come from up with money to pay tax? How am I going to pay myself? How am I going to get out of debt? How am I going to do all these things? How am I going to expand my practice? How am I going to do all these things? Okay, well, once you start doing that, now your profit becomes, a necessity of the business. And it really has been game changing for a lot of owners.
Well, so what do they literally do? How do you look at what their current profit is, or you look at what it should be, or?
I'd like to see I like to see their industry to see what it should be. But mostly, I'll just ask questions of like, hey, how do you view your profit? Well, like most people do, I look at my expenses every month and whatever's left over, I guess, is my profit. And I'm like, well, that's an inverse of what should be happening. Your profit is your first thing that should be taken. Why? Because if you don't, it should be prioritized. We'll call it the profit priority. Because if you don't have a profit, you're not able to expand. If you look at the derivation of the actual word profit, it actually means to expand. Kind of like I looked up, you forced me to look up the derivation of the word genius because I was curious. And, the derivation of the word genius actually means to beget or produce, which I was like, wow, that's kind of interesting, right? It's like it's an inherent, innate thing. So, but profit means to expand. You cannot expand personally or professionally if you don't have a profit. So that's why the importance of putting it in as a necessity and just, hoping and praying that it shows up is not really a strategy. So
that's sort of how when I'm evaluating taking on a new customer, for instance, I could say, all right, from a profit first perspective, the numbers show me right off the bat, even before I take them with my overheads, I'm going to lose money on this person. So I could just not take them in the first place. I guess you can make decisions like that by having a profit first perspective. Is that right?
Are you talking about like someone taking on new patients or?
Yeah, like a new patient. Every price is custom, let's say, but you look at your overheads and you're like, I can't afford this, and I'll lose money taking them.
We've run into that. People that are taking certain insurances that, they're not able to sustain the organization long term. And yeah, you got to make some difficult decisions on that. And yes, it forces you to look at, your staff and what you're getting out of them and your overhead and everything else. But look, that's why there's a difference between just being a practitioner and being like an owner and an investor. And, if you're going to own a healthcare practice, you got to know the difference between the two, because there's the healthcare side and the practitioner side, but then there's also the owner side. And sometimes those, I don't think they have to be different, because I think any good organization should have profit. It should be there. But the laws of money kind of take over if you're not mindful of how the money is managed, unfortunately.
Well, do you have any redacted examples of, someone you worked with and you figured out how to help them and then they got better?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was just talking to someone yesterday who's an optometrist, and he had a great practice. He probably did $4 billion a year in revenue, and boy, he spent every cent of that for 20 years. And when he came to us, he had a great practice. He was a stalwart of the community. Everyone knew him. He paid his people, extremely well. He just looked at his personal portfolio, and there's like, I don't have much to show for this aside from I have a great practice. I was like, okay, well then let's start putting some of these systems in play. And first thing I did is I had him incorporate that. Let's start putting setting up these accounts. And, over the course of the next 8 or 9 years, and again, it doesn't happen overnight, but it does happen. He was able to increase his profit margin from where it was, I think, at maybe a 5% to an 18 to 19% margin, which increased the value of his practice from, I think it was maybe 2 or 3 million, and he ended up selling for $9.2 million. And he went to having like $400,000 in retirement to having $2.1 million in retirement over that time frame. I didn't look, it's not like a magic mystic money maker. I just show people how to not allow money to get lost, because
where does it go? I mean, there's this same phenomenon with my stuff, that there's money in the account and it somehow gets spent. But when you help people, where is it going?
It just goes everywhere. It's like a dam that breaks. I don't know every nook and cranny of where it's going to go, but if you do not have like what I would call a CFO mindset, and the CFO, if you don't have someone that's kind of helping you navigate all this stuff, it goes everywhere. It can go to consumption. It can go to overpaying, your staff. It can go to buying needless equipment that maybe you think you need, but you don't. Your accountant says, hey, you're going to have a big tax bill. You have to go buy something that you probably don't need unless you want to pay $50,000 in tax. Okay. That's not a smart use of money just to avoid the tax liability. So it can go in a number of places. And that's the phenomenon that we see. And that's kind of what I learned, that first guiding principle is like, it's going to go everywhere unless you really have control of it. So you have to know where 99 cents of your dollar is going to go before it comes in. Before it even comes in, you know where it's going to go before that. And that's the trick that people that seemingly have a lot of money, I think, learn more than most of society. Because most of society works backward. Like they make the money, it comes in, and then it gets spent because they don't have a real plan of where that money should be allocated to actually grow their net worth as opposed to just kind of get by.
So what does a made up allocation of a dollar look like in a company?
Yeah, simple. I would say, let's take a look at what a profit margin for a healthcare business should probably be right around 20 to 25%. Now, some of them are higher than that. Some of them are lower, but let's say it's around 20 to 25%. Okay. So the 20% profit margin, half of that's going to go to you as the owner. All right. And when I say it's going to go to you as the owner, it means it gets physically removed from the business and goes to a personal account, okay, for the benefit of the household. We call it a wealth storage account. So literally what happens is that when, let's say that you bring in $200,000 in a revenue month, all right, 10% of that 200,000, which would be 20 grand, gets transferred out of the business account to a personal, what we call a wealth storage account. Now, what is that money for? It's not for watches and cars and boats and consumption items. It is so that you can use that to create other income sources, whether it's real estate or stocks and bonds or, whatever your kind of investment strategy is, that's what that money is going for. Okay. That's the first 10% of revenue. 5% of revenue, 3 to 5 probably should go into a tax account so that you have money to pay your taxes. Another 5% should go into business savings accounts. So you have at least 2 months of business reserves and savings. And then another 3 to 5% goes into what we call a business expansion and development account so that you can use that money for bonuses or expansion purposes or whatever. And then you got to operate on 80% of that, right? So now 20% goes to my profit accounts. The rest, I got to handle payroll, rent, cost of goods sold, marketing, whatever it is. But that's how I have to operate. And it takes some getting used to. But once that system is in, it really works well because I know where the money's going to go before it comes in. I think that's the key.
Do a lot of businesses have shortfalls where you want it to go here, there, and everywhere, but it just, they can't, or they have to make a lot of adjustments?
No, in the beginning stages for this to really work, you have to do it on a gradient. What I mean by that is if I tell someone they need to start taking 10% of their revenue and putting it away for themselves, well, the business isn't accustomed to it. Not accustomed to that expense yet. So they have to start small. So I'd probably start like maybe in the 1% to 2% range. And then every single month, just try to get a little bit better, right? And as you start to pull the money out, it's going to increase the demand and the necessity to make more money and be more productive. And that's kind of the trick of the whole thing, is that we're just using, again, these natural laws that say, hey, a business will make it. If I put enough pressure on it, it's going to make the money to cover it. But you have to start out small. So we try to start out at maybe 1% or 2% and then just gradually increase that over a 7 or 8 month period. But I mean, my God, so it takes 7 or 8 months. But after that, if you're like, you wake up one day, and I've seen this many a times where I've had an owner call me and say, Eric, I don't know where you came up with this money, but I have $100,000 sitting in my wealth storage account and my business accounts look pretty healthy right now. And I thought I knew my number, but where's all this money coming from? I was like, it's called control. You put in good control, and that's what happened. It's not magic.
Well, how did this manifest in your own life? Can't see that you're like a spendthrift and yet you advise people, but you don't control your own stuff.
I do the same thing. We do the same thing for our business that we preach to people. We have, we set target, and when I set a target for someone, like if I say, what does your make break number mean to you? You're probably going to say, well, that's the bare amount that I need to survive. Is that how you would define that for yourself? Like that's the bare amount. That's what most people think, right? So and I say, okay, great. Well, why don't we just include your profit accounts or your buffers in that make break number? Because that is what really allows you to survive well. So when I ask somebody what your make break number is for your business, they come up with a number, right? And then when I get in there and I say, okay, your make break number is really about 15% more than what you think it is. And that's why you're having so many problems right now with cash flow. So we correct that first. Like, oh, you're right. I'm making $200,000 a month. I need to be making $225,000. I'm like, yeah. So go in there and figure out how many more product people you have to see a week, how many other, treatment that you can do. What can you do to solve that problem? And you know what? People figure it out. And that's the magic behind it. People will figure it out if you give them the right target.
So is this usually a company extra effort and making more money, or because the money's not controlled?
It can be both.
It would have enough to survive normally.
Yeah. It can be both. Sometimes we'll go in there and I'll see that someone's payroll is like 65% of their revenue. And I'm just like, you're not getting as much production out of your staff as you probably should. Okay. Or you're overstaffed in certain areas. And yeah, they have to confront tough things. But again, my job as a financial guy is to make sure the sustainability and the long-term survival of your business and your household. And if the business isn't doing well, or it's barely getting by, that's not long-term survival. So yeah, sometimes we have to make people like put it right in front of their face to like show them like this is what's happening. And then some people have the confront to actually get in there and make changes. Some people don't.
So what are some of the some of the amazing stories you've seen or heard? You gave the example of the 100,000 in the account, which is fantastic. Any other ones that jump out at you over the years?
Yeah, I think another one too is when I have people start prioritizing their profits in their practice. There's been kind of a phenomenon that's happened over the last 7 years where a lot of these practices that usually sold for maybe 75% of their revenue, yearly revenue, they're now selling for a lot more than that, and these healthcare
practices, which, I've seen them sell for anywhere between 9 and 10 times their earnings. So I feel good when I have a practice owner that thought he was only going to get, maybe $1 million for the sale of his practice, ends up getting $3 million. Why? Why does that happen? What do the buyers and potential buyers see in those businesses they don't see in others? Well, they know that people need these particular services, and they want practices that can grow and sustain themselves and provide that service to the community. And a lot of these buyers are willing to pay more. And a lot of it comes from private equity, which, is good, bad, or ugly, I guess, depending upon your viewpoint of that. That allows them to acquire a lot of these practices. And then, of course, they end up selling them to bigger groups. But it's good for the, private practice owner because they're getting, more money than I've ever seen them get in the past for the sale of their practice. So these are, what kind of buyers recognize this and what kind don't? I mean, so the hedge funds and private equity, do you recognize a company that's really lean and well run and that they pay more? Oh, yeah. I mean, you think of it from a buyer's perspective. If you go into a business that is not well run, has a lot of employee problems, is not profitable, you're going to have to fix a lot of things. And maybe you want to do that. And you're certainly not going to overpay for it. Like, you're going to probably look at that business and say, I'm probably only going to give you, a pretty low percentage because I have to go in and fix these things. But if I go into a business that has strong profit, has really good leadership, has good systems in place, has multiple practitioners in there that's delivering really good quality medicine, is really known in the community. Okay, great. I don't have to fix a lot. I'm going to pay you more for that because of that. And that's what ends up happening. So that's why I try to teach people, you have to treat your practice is not just a job. It's an investment. And if you treat it like an investment, it will pay you back many times over what you put into it. But you have to treat it like an investment. And that's tough sometimes for people in the medical industry because they're so focused on just the healthcare aspect of it as opposed to the business side of it. So what are the top reasons people come to you? Is it they want to sell their business and they've been told they're not going to get very much and they're like, there's got to be a way to maximize the value, or they're on death's door financially? Or like, what are the top reasons? People come to us because they know us, that we specialize in working in this field, and they know that, we know them and we know their industry. So, people like communities, they like their own tribes, they like to know that you know them. Like if I talk to a veterinarian, hey, I have multiple veterinary clients, they love that, right? Because they know that I know them. If I talk to a dentist or, orthopedic surgeon, and then we have clients like that, hey, I know your industry, I know your business. They like that because I can identify with them. A lot of people, I'll have people come to me and say, hey, Eric, I'm making good money, but I just don't know what to do with it, which is a great problem to have. I love to help people like that. Another problem would be, hey, I'm making great money, but just like you had mentioned, I don't know where it's going. And I know that I probably need to do some things differently because I don't know where my money's going. So, we certainly can help people with that as well. So it really there's the spectrum when it comes to that. But I think when someone is in need of change is typically when they will seek out someone like me to help them. It's amazing too. They're not only able to put money away, but they pay you guys too, because I know your service isn't free, of course. So it's really a testament, Yeah, absolutely. But we've looked at the numbers as far as what we charge people to help get them, straight, or at least to clean up their finances, get them some good systems in place and then really grow from there. And, again, if I can show someone how to become debt free in 5 to 7 years, if I can show someone how to have a lifetime of retirement and to sell their practice for a lot more than what they ever thought they would, what's the value of that? And I think a lot of people see that. How did you get your first client? What industry were they in? Physical therapy, and it was kind of the same thing. We work with a business consultant, and they said, hey, we're making a bunch of money for our people, but they just don't know what to do with it. So we're like, okay, cool. So we'll create a financial course for them. And that's what we did. We created a financial course, showed them the basics of money and finances and how that relates to their business. And we got people to sign up from there. And then we kind of moved from industry to industry from there. But that's how we got our first client. Do people want to save money, or do they want to grow and the saving comes along with it? Well, look, I'm not under the either or kind of scenario.
scenario, which I think a lot of people that are on a fixed wage are. I can only do this or I can only do that. Most people that are entrepreneurial or have businesses have the luxury of saying, I want to do both. And I agree. I want you to do both. I want you to be able to save money, to invest, to create a future for yourself. But at the same time, I also want you to use money for fun and have great experiences. And, I've seen both sides of the spectrum. I've seen people that hoard money and I've seen people that are spendthrift, and they're both miserable. So there's got to be something in between where you are using money for fun and enjoyment, which it should be used for, but you're also being responsible enough to know that things can happen. And I need to make sure I plan so that I am not, 75 years old with nothing to show for it.
Yeah. I saw a documentary recently on YouTube about that. All these old couples that were like in their 70s or even worse, and they had no money. And I was so frightened by the end of it. I was like, man, why did I watch that? It was terrible. And that is more to the norm. That's more the norm than anything else. That is more the norm. Most people are woefully underestimating how much they're going to need in income, assets, and resources to live the life that they want to live. Woefully underestimate how much that actually is. Some people think it's 1 million, 2 million, 3 million. I got news for you. If you really want to have a life where you can kind of really do anything that you want to, again, I cater to mostly people that own their own businesses in the healthcare industry, but we really have a target of like $4 to $5 million of total asset is what you're going to need, right? Not just in retirement accounts, but real estate, value of your businesses, and all of your other investments. That should probably be a good first target for people. Is that assuming that the whole thing earns like 4% interest?
4 to 5, earning a 5% rate of return. So what is that? $250,000 a year? That's what it would be. Because that's what most of them make, in their working years. And I don't want people to live on less. You wouldn't want to live on less. I don't want that. So, yeah. So yeah, you have to set a bigger target than what most people think. And again, this is kind of the kick in the butt we have to give to people because they've been told that, well, I only need this much. And I'm like, yeah, you can do that, but you're really going to have to worry about money forever. So let's not do that. You don't have to.
Doesn't take or say you're going to have to eat cat food when you're old now.
Yeah, I'm going to do that.
So who would be a good client for you and who wouldn't be? What are some of the parameters?
Look, anybody that owns their own business that has, let's say that does over, I don't know, 850,000 in revenue and isn't part of like a big partner, like a big partnership group would be a good client for us. Someone that is in control of their cash flow, that has a business, like I said, that's doing about 850,000 in revenue or more, anywhere between 850 and probably 10 million is our sweet spot of helping people. And then, I think from there, they're just willing to accept help, and they're open to being, given a plan and following a plan and can be held accountable for that. Because again, that's most people when they have financial advisors, what are they talking to their financial advisors? Maybe once a year, going over the beginning of the year when it's too, and that's it. I'm like, your money doesn't, you got to pay attention to it. Our service model is like once a month we're talking to our people because there's always financial questions that come up. So the whole financial model, advisory model of like once or twice a year, I'm like, man, that's just not enough. You really have to have a team where you're looking at this stuff a lot more routinely.
Well, how can people get in touch if they want to be evaluated and see how you can help them? What's the best way?
It's a great question. They can go to our website, econologic.com, which is econologits.com. We have a really cool financial scorecard. We call it our Financial Prosperity Index, where it's about 100 question assessment. You can take it right online. You don't need to know what you have in your bank accounts or, what your debt is or anything like that. You just answer 100 questions, yes, no, or maybe, and it'll give you a score, almost like a credit score of where you stand in all the critical areas that make up your finances. And it's a great place to start because it'll show you some areas that, hey, I'm doing well here. My retirement's on track. My debt and credit's okay. Ooh, my estate plan. I haven't done my wills and trust and all that. But it'll give you a score for each of those different areas. So it's a really great tool. I'd encourage people to go on there and take it.
And I guess last thing, I don't know, when people have asked me financial questions, I'm like, oh man, because you have to reveal what you've been doing. Sometimes you feel like an idiot or a loser. I've been bad with money, that kind of thing. Does that stop people from working with you? And how do you overcome that?
No, because we ask a lot of questions to people, and it really does start with, I don't care what condition that you're in at all, good, bad, or ugly. And as long as you're willing to confront and look at your current scene for what it is, not what you want it to be, what it is, and you're willing to take some responsibility for maybe some of the things that you've done in the past that weren't awesome, then we can work with people. And those kinds of people, I think, turn out to be the best client because they are willing to look at their situation for what it is. They're not going to give excuses. They're willing to say, you know what, I know I shouldn't have done this, and this, but I want to make up the damage and take responsibility for it right now. And those people fix their conditions so quickly when they do that. It's the people that want to fight and, go to like 6 different people for opinions till they hear the one that fits their viewpoint. Those are more problematic. I'm sure you probably encountered that in your life too.
Yeah, I try not to be one.
Oh, very good, Eric. So, thank you very much for coming. It's been eye-opening, and it's really cool to see that it does not seem like,
I don't know, having a heart transplant to fix your business, or it doesn't seem like magic or any of that. It sounds like a few simple changes of allocation really does it.
It's amazing how much it can have an impact on your life. That's what ends up happening, because maybe you've heard the term burnout before. I've heard people get burnout, and, from what I've seen, people get burnout because if you're doing an activity and you're not getting back from that activity, let's say I'm like working really hard, but I'm not getting back either compensation or recognition or whatever it is. I mean, that's going to have a negative effect on your emotional well-being. So I just see a lot of people, especially medical professionals, that when they're not getting the financial reward that they should from running a business like this, then that gets them irritable and tired and really can have an effect on them. So that's what's important to me, is that they take care of themselves financially so that they want to stay in the game and do that. And I think that's the biggest reward that we get.
Oh, this is last question. What if someone's not in a medical practice industry like that? They hear what you're saying and they're like, man, I need the help. I'm in a construction business or whatever. And they get help. Like, what's it called, what you do, and who should they look for?
Well, they could certainly come to us. We focus most of our attention in this space, in the medical space. But honestly, I have clients that had Amazon businesses. I have clients that had construction businesses. I had clients that have done all kinds of marketing business. I've had clients that do all kinds of things. I honestly think I've learned enough right now that there's so many similarities in business and the cash flow of how it works. There's nuances to it, but I could probably figure out someone's business and how they make money and their profitability in a future, and not very long. And all the basic laws still apply. It doesn't really matter what kind of business that you own. As long as it generates cash, we can help.
Okay. Well, very good, Eric. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
If you like this podcast, please click the link in the description to subscribe and review us on iTunes.
You've been listening to the Finding Genius podcast with Richard Jacobs. If you like what you hear, be sure to review and subscribe to the Finding Genius podcast on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. And want to be smarter than everybody else? Become a premium member at findinggeniuspodcast.com. This podcast is for information only. No advice of any kind is being given. Any action you take or don't take as a result of listening is your sole responsibility. Consult professionals when advice is needed.